Good evening. Good to see you again. Activate Worcester, show number 85, I think it is. Hard to believe we've been racking them up at that rate. Also, it's nice to be doing summertime shows, which is what we're doing now. I can be dressed in something as fashionable as this, if you will. And so far, so good. It's been a good summer for all of us. I hope you're enjoying it. Good 4th of July, crazy weather, but we got through it pretty well. And once again, we have a quality show today, and we have a quality individual with us. We have Father Fred Enman, who is not only an interesting individual, but has a very, very unique program that is doing some wonderful things right here in Worcester. And Fred, Father Fred, delighted to have you here, sir.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Father is involved with a program called Matthew 25. And I think before we go too far down the road with this, perhaps you can explain what Matthew 25 is in fact all about.
Sure. Matthew 25 is a private nonprofit corporation, and the mission of Matthew 25 is to engage in the work of providing both food relief and housing relief to people in need. The most conspicuous part of our program is the housing side of things, and we have been rehabilitating abandoned houses here in Worcester for 20 years now. We started in 1994, and we continue to this very day to do that type of work.
May I ask you why Matthew 25?
Well, Matthew 25 is a passage in one of the Gospels, Matthew's Gospels, chapter 25. And there's a little judgment scene in that chapter. And Jesus separates the sheep from the goats, the good from the bad. The criteria of judgment are whether or not you give food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, welcome the stranger, clothe the naked, comfort the sick, and visit those in prison. So we try to do some things that are in the spirit of Matthew 25. And the ways that became most important to me were to be involved in the food relief and also by welcoming the stranger by engaging in the rehabilitation of abandoned houses. Our purpose doing that is to provide quality, affordable rental housing to low-income families who are looking for a safe, healthy place to live.
Do you have any current projects you're working on?
We're currently working on house number 10 here in Worcester at number 3 Benefit Terrace. It is a 3-story house, not a 3-decker, but a good-sized 3-story house. And we're dividing the space up into 2 units. So it's called Philadelphia style. One unit will be all the first floor and half of the second. The other unit will be the other half of the second and all of the third floor.
Wow.
So we'll have a 4-bedroom apartment and a 3-bedroom apartment in that house.
I have to ask, what was the genesis of this? How did you start?
Well, believe it or not, it started as a theology school project. During the 1988-89 school year, I was a student at the Weston Jesuit School of Theology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it was my 4th and final year of theology. I had to do a pastoral project to complete the requirements for the degree. So I proposed starting a nonprofit organization called Matthew 25 to be involved with both food relief and housing relief. And the project was approved by the coordinator of the program at the school. And as a Jesuit priest, I need to go to see my provincial and ask him for permission to do that kind of work, because I knew it was going to be a significant work. And I went to see Father Bob Manning and told him what I wanted to do. And he gave me his blessing, said, go ahead, give it a try, see what happens.
Now, you did this as an individual as opposed to a group of students at that point, theology students, who were doing this as a team effort.
Yeah, it was a project that I was going to be responsible for, but there was no way I could carry it out without the help of a lot of people. And I had been at the school for 3 years already, and I had a lot of friends in the Jesuit community and also lay students who were there. They were extremely helpful to me. getting that program off the ground and moving. The very first fundraiser we did was very simple. In November of 1988, we ran a benefit garage sale. There were 10 Jesuit houses in Cambridge. I knew what my house was like. We had closets and cellar that was full of stuff we didn't need, that we didn't use. I knew the other houses were in the same condition. So I called the superior of the community to ask him if I could contact a friend in each house, have them go through all their stuff that they didn't need, and bring it to the school's auditorium on a Friday night so we could set it up for a garage sale. And that's exactly what happened. I advertised the garage sale in Cambridge. We made $1,000. And the half of that money went overseas to Haiti for food relief, and half went to the Greater Boston Food Bank.
So at that point, you knew you were onto something.
I knew I was onto something. It could work.
Now, has that been your focus for the last pretty close to 30 years, if you will?
Yeah, we just celebrated our 25th anniversary last year, so we're in our 26th year. It has been a big part of my life every year since the beginning. Right now, I'm the executive director of Matthew 25. I do that on a half-time basis, and I do it on a pro bono basis as well. I am not compensated for it. But I also work at Boston College Law School in Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm the assistant to the dean for students there. I do work with the dean for students, helping various student organizations with their budget and program. I'm also the chaplain at the law school, so I wear 2 hats there.
At least.
Yeah, so I do that during the school year, 3 days a week. I come out to Worcester for Matthew 25, 2 days a week, and in the summer I reverse that. I do 2 days a week at the law school, and then 3 days a week out. 3 days a week out here.
Why Worcester?
Well, Worcester's my hometown. I was born and raised on Grafton Hill.
Were you really?
Yep. Yeah. And my parents were born and raised on Grafton Hill as well. So I feel very comfortable in Worcester. It's my home, and I have a lot of family and friends in the Worcester area. So that was a really big help too. At that time, when we started the first house, I was teaching at Holy Cross. So I was physically situated in Worcester. And I had a lot of contacts I could rely on, both for fundraising, to raise the money to do the house, and also for technical support, for the physical work of getting the project done.
Do you see expanding beyond Worcester? In other words, are there other people within the Jesuit community who would be interested in hypothetically going out west towards Springfield, Holyoke, etc., or closer to the city itself?
Yep. Well,
the city of Boston, excuse me.
Well, I was very fortunate. With the help of some friends from Boston College, I was able to raise enough money to do a similar project in Boston. It's on 81 Woodrow Avenue in the Dorchester section, and we totally renovated an abandoned single-family home there. And we now have a single mom living there with 4 children.
Wow.
So we have expanded out to Boston. I would love to expand elsewhere. It's always a matter of resources and a matter of time.
So you do the initial site selection.
I've done the site selection on every property so far.
How does that work? What do you just drive around and?
That's exactly what I did on the first house. I had done a fundraiser at Gilrain's Blues Club on Main Street.
Familiar with it.
And we raised a couple of $1,000s on a fundraiser night. And at the time, it was owned by Barbara Haller and Robin Scott. And they asked me how I was going to use the money. And I said, well, to rehab an abandoned house somewhere in Worcester. They said, would you be willing to do that right here in this neighborhood in Maine South? I said, sure, if I can find a house. And they said, well, what are you doing on Saturday? And I said, I don't have any plans. And they said, we'd like to take you through the Maine South corridor from downtown all the way to Webster Square. Look at every house, abandoned house on Main Street, every abandoned house on every side street. We want you to choose one, and we'll help you to get that house so you can work on it. So we spent 2 to 3 hours that Saturday afternoon. I looked at about 60 abandoned houses, and there was one that caught my eye, a house abandoned that looked somewhat derelict, but it was a beautiful house. As it turned out, it was on the Massachusetts Historical Register.
And it was abandoned.
And it was abandoned.
Wow.
And the architectural style is called Second Empire. So it's 2 floors, rectangular shaped. The 3rd floor is a mansard roof, slanted roof with the French windows. What a lovely house. I could see it all fixed up. I said, that's the house I want. So I found out who owned it, and I began to approach him. As it turned out, he had had some very difficult economic times. He had filed a bankruptcy. He didn't want any part of the house whatsoever. So he said, I'd be happy to transfer my interest to you at no charge.
Period.
Period. Now, the problem was, he had taken out a $50,000 note from Consumers Bank. Consumers Bank got bought by the Bank of New England. Bank of New England went bankrupt. The note went to the new Bank of New England. That bank went bankrupt. And then it finally went to Fleet, and they had a division called Recall Management that was looking at the non-performing loans. So I had to get in touch with the representative of Recall, who came and looked at the property. He said, you really want this abandoned house, in this condition? I said, yes, I would really like to. He said, would you be willing to make a $500 payment for it?
One time
$500 payment. I said, I think we can handle that.
So then it's off his books at that point.
It's off of his books. So the owner of record transferred his interest by quitclaim deed. Recall Management, on behalf of the bank, transferred their interest by quitclaim deed. So you put those 2 quitclaim deeds together, you have good title. So at that point, we could proceed working on the house, rehabilitating, raising money, going to foundations, going to the city of Worcester. And that's how it all began.
Where do you get the manpower to do this?
Well, I'm really blessed. The first work day we had was a group of students from Holy Cross and people from the neighborhood who came over to do demolition. And I had never done anything like this before. So I have a cousin by marriage, Chris Phillips, married to my cousin Joyce. And I asked Chris if he would come over. He's a skilled carpenter. I asked him if he'd come over, not to work, but to supervise us, just to make sure we didn't take something out that was going to bring the house down. So he came and watched us, and he said to me, now, Father Fred, how are you going to get your carpentry done? And I said, well, Chris, you're a carpenter. You have carpenter friends. Maybe you could come over, take a look at what needs to be done, give us an estimate. He said, well, I have a better idea. I have a friend who works at Worcester Vocational High School, now Worcester Technical High School. And he said, let me call him, see if they might be able to do something. So a month later, I got a call that the teacher of the seniors was going to come out to the house and look at it. I met him. His name was Phil Solomon. And what a wonderful guy. He took a tour of the abandoned house, and he said, you know what, Father? We've been talking in-house at the school for 10 years about trying to get into the community, work on a project that makes a difference. We haven't done a thing. It's about time that we do something. I will be here next week with my seniors.
So you were really the catalyst in pulling this whole thing together, as it turns out.
Yep, I was the one, making the contacts and reaching out to people. And when you do that, if you're willing to take on that role, you find out how many generous people there are out there. That's one of the blessings for me, being the executive director of Matthew 25.
Well, now you look at this particular house that you're describing. It's been abandoned, and nowadays when a house is abandoned, very often vandals go in, they strip the brass and it's the electrical. You end up with a shell in many, many cases. Did you have a handle as to what you were really getting into at that point, number one? And secondly, did you have a pretty good idea of how much it would take in terms of dollars to complete this project?
A big no to your question. Big no. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was a little naive about it, and it's a good thing because I wouldn't have undertaken the project if I had known how much work it was going to be. But I had some of the best volunteers you could ever.
And again, this was your first project.
My first project.
Wow.
And it was a big house. It was built as a duplex during 1863. So it's the middle of the Civil War. And you have this very large house. Each family had a 3-story townhouse. each townhouse is so big, we have a 2-bedroom and a 4-bedroom apartment on each side of the house.
Each side.
So what used to be, somebody's single-family home now is a 2-bedroom and a 4-bedroom apartment. You would have no idea that it's a duplex when you look at it from the outside, but it is, and it was a huge project. I was able to raise enough funds because I have some generous benefactors. I was able to raise $100,000 from family members and friends. I was able.
And excuse me, this is 1988?
This is when we started
Pretty
working
close.
on that. We started working on the house in 1994.
94.
And I had started raising money in 1990. So by 94, I had raised $40,000. And in the next couple of years, I raised another $60,000
To complete it.
to complete it. In addition to that, we got a commitment from the city of Worcester for $100,000 in federal funds, $80,000 federal home funds and $20,000 block grant money. And we were still short $89,000. So I went to the flagship bank, which is now People's United Bank, and I talked to a banker there, and I wanted to explain myself and introduce myself. He says, "Father, you don't have to say anything more. I've already heard of you." And I said, "How's that?" He goes, "Well, my wife Ann has an uncle who's a Jesuit priest, Joe O'Connor, and he told us about you. I was hoping you would come." I've never received that kind of reception at a bank.
Wow.
We were hoping you would come and ask us for money. So everything worked out. I got an $83,000 or an $89,000 loan from the flagship bank. So those were the components that made it possible to do the house. And with the federal money, as long as you rent to low-income families for 10 years, the loan is forgiven. With the flagship bank, as soon as tenants came in and started paying rent, we paid the bank back from the rents that we received from the tenants.
So let me interrupt you right there. So what you're doing is you're taking a house that's in dire straits, you're refurbing it with a lot of TLC, obviously,
Yes.
and then you're actually retaining title to it.
Yes.
And you're not flipping it. You're not selling it.
We're not selling
like
it.
Habitat for Humanity, I believe that's what they do. And you're just using it as a rental property.
That's exactly right.
So you have a combination, I assume, of Section 8 people in there and non-Section 8 as well.
Exactly. Yep. Some of our tenants are Section 8 certificate holders, so we get close to a market rent for those tenants, but for some of them, we pay their utilities because they don't have much in the way of extra income. And for the tenants who do not have a Section 8 certificate, we charge about 25% of their income for rent.
That's it.
That's it. And
Wow.
that was the rule of thumb when I was growing up on Grafton Hill. People, one paycheck a month was for rent.
Absolutely.
And I still think that's the way to go.
Well, I didn't grow up in Grafton Hill. I grew up in a place called Brooklyn, but we had exactly the same concept. One week a month is what you paid. And when you exceeded that, you were kidding yourself because eventually it would come up and bite you.
Exactly. You would get
So-
into financial trouble.
Isn't that something? Now, how do you go about selecting? Because I'm sure there's many, many people that want to access in essence, a brand new house at below market rates
Yes,
and so
yes.
forth. How do you go about selecting the people?
Well,
qualify?
it's a two-step process. The first step is we have committed to the city and also to the Internal Revenue Service, so it's a serious commitment that in order to maintain our tax-exempt status, we will always use the standards from the Federal Home Funds Program, eligibility guidelines, economic eligibility guidelines, as we choose our tenants. So I solicit applications. I get word of mouth out through our current tenants. I also advertise on the Worcester Telegram. So we get applications that way. And then my board likes me to narrow it down to 3 families. At that point, the board gets involved. They'll join me. They'll join the Worcester area director, and we'll interview the 3 families that I have chosen. And then we try to come to a consensus on which of the three families would be best suited for the apartment that's available. One of the things we're looking for at that stage is responsibility. We want to make sure that the family who comes in will respect the property. If it's a multifamily house, that they'll respect the other tenants. And if, every house is situated in a neighborhood, so we want to make sure they'll respect the neighbors as well. We ask for references from either somebody who's involved with their social service delivery system or a pastor, just as long as we can get a letter of reference from somebody talking about the family. Another thing I do that I found out over time is extremely helpful is to ask for the report cards of the children.
Really?
Yeah. And the third house that
Wow.
we did is in the Clark University neighborhood.
It's Maine South.
In the Maine South.
Yeah.
And if you grow up in that neighborhood, it's free tuition at Clark if you can get in. So we wanted the family who moved in there to have a chance to be able to make use of that offer.
What a great concept.
So
that is.
we asked
Wow.
for the report cards, and the family that had the best report cards for the kids is the family that got the house. Were able to rent the house from us. And as it turned out, they became our most successful tenant family in all the Matthew 25 houses. So it spoke volumes to me that the report cards of the children can speak significantly to the success of the family.
Marvelous. What impact at all does the Diocese of Worcester have?
The Worcester Diocese per se is not directly connected with this project.
In any way?
Not in any way, but individual parishes are. I write to the pastors of parishes, and I write to leaders of other organizations asking them for financial support for Matthew 25. And a lot of parishes have a social concerns committee or funds that they have available to help people in need.
So it's really a grassroots kind
It's
of
grassroots. So I've gotten assistance from the parishes that way. I also have received volunteer support from the parishes that way. In addition to the high school students that I have from the technical high school coming, in addition to the students from the Youth Build program in Worcester who come, in addition to the college students who come, I get a lot of volunteers from church communities, church groups.
Right now, roughly, how many properties do you have that are operational?
We have 9 houses up and running
9.
in Worcester
Wow.
that are totally up and running with 17 apartments. And we're at 100% occupancy right now. Every apartment has a family. And
do you ever
we're
have-
working on house number 10.
Did you ever have to dislodge somebody because they didn't respect it?
I have had to terminate 3 tenancies, and it was very difficult for me to do that. It was a learning experience for me. All 3 of those terminations had to do with drug use
How did I
and
know
drug abuse. And I talked with the families involved on each occasion, and there was no improvement in the situation. So for the safety of the other tenants, for the safety of the neighbors, I had to terminate those tenancies.
Well, they really terminated themselves.
It was, in a way, it's self-termination. Yes.
It's not, you sitting on high and making a thumbs up, thumbs down,
Right, exactly.
Tough call, though. Tough call. What I find curious, somewhat curious, is the lack of having a partnership with the diocese itself. You would think, with all the resources and so on and so forth, that something like Matthew 25 would fit hand in glove with that. And instead, it's like, no, you got to do your own thing at the local level.
Well,
but it's working. It is working.
It's working. Yeah, the diocese, raises money for the Catholic Charities program.
Yep.
And that is a wonderful organization that does, extraordinary work, not only in Worcester, but in North County and South County. So
Is that the same thing as Bishop's Fund?
it's the Bishop's Fund, yep. And the Bishop's Fund money all goes to Catholic Charities to support the various ministries and the various services that they're engaged in throughout the diocese. But I have been very satisfied with the support I've gotten from pastors at the parishes who have either talked to their parishioners about Matthew 25 or have access to funds for the poor that the parish administers, and have received a lot of donations that way.
How big can this program become?
Well, my original hope was that there would be a Matthew 25 in each one of the 6 New England states. I'm hoping, that happens someday. Right now, we're in Worcester and the one house in Boston. But as I have found out over time, it is very, very demanding. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to raise the money for just one house, to rehabilitate it. And it takes a lot of my time, doing the fundraising. I would love to be in all 6 states at the same time, but physically I'm unable to do it.
Well, especially when you're doing this part-time.
I'm doing it part-time. Yep.
So this is a labor of love at this point for you.
It's a labor of love for sure.
Whew, wow. It's an incredible story, Folks, we call this, as you know, Activate Worcester. And this is probably the best example of what people can do at the grassroots level to help out the neighborhood and help people who really are, in fact, in need. As we close, what I'd like you to do is possibly talk to the people that are watching and let them know how they can possibly get in touch with you or get involved with an amazing program like Matthew 25.
Sure.
Please.
Well, thank you, Ron, for this opportunity to speak to people about this. I have been blessed in so many ways to be involved with Matthew 25. I have seen a lot of generosity. I have received a lot of support from my family and friends, from Holy Cross alumni, from Boston College alumni, from my high school classmates and other classes from St. John's High School in Shrewsbury. I've received support from foundations in Worcester, the Fletcher Foundation, the Started Trust, the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, and we've had wonderful support from Saint-Gobain here in Worcester, who were able to provide to us for our prior house that we were working on a grant of $52,000 that came from their headquarters in Paris, France. And the local Worcester plant gave us a donation this year of $15,000, last year $15,000, and the year before that $15,000. So the biggest need that I have for Matthew 25 is to raise the money to buy the materials that our volunteers use. So if you could visit us at our website at www.mat25.org, there is a way for you to donate right there online, or you can phone me personally at 617-552-1910, 617-552-1910. And I thank you very much for your attention to all of this.
Take advantage of it. Pick up the phone, go online, check it out. Well worth doing it. Father, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ron.
Outstanding.